We have a great guest on, Dan Martell.
Dan Martell.
Dan Martell.
Dan Martell.
I'd be sitting here and I'd be like, oh man, I wish I would have had something to drink before I started or whatever. And I'd just be like, in my mind, I just ask myself, how can I appreciate even more God's grace and guidance in this moment?
Wow.
And immediately, see how it just changes the scanning of the world?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm like, oh.
Before we dive into the wild story of Dan Martell, I need to tell you about my own story. For years, I thought building a business meant building my own prison. Every time I hired someone, it felt like adding another steel bar to my cell. Every time we grew, the walls felt like they were closing in. I was trapped. I was working all the time, missing out on my life, and I felt like a slave to the very thing I had created. I was drowning, and I couldn't see any way out. The business I loved was starting to destroy me. Then I picked up a book. Just a book. But the words inside hit me like a lightning bolt. They presented one single powerful idea that shattered everything I thought I knew about work and life. The idea was simple, but it changed my world. It said, you don't hire people to grow your business. You hire people to buy back your time. That book was called Buy Back Your Time. And the man who wrote it was Dan Martell. That one sentence, that one idea, has completely flipped my business and my life upside down. It's the entire reason we are making this documentary. Because to really, truly understand why that idea is so powerful, you have to understand the man who was tough enough to create it. You have to understand a man who almost lost all of his time, forever, locked away in a dark place. This isn't just another boring business story. This is a story about what freedom really means. It's about how much time is truly worth, told by a man who had it all stolen from him. This whole story asks one giant question. How does a teenager, locked in a jail cell where his time belongs to the government, become a world-famous coach who teaches the most successful people on earth how to get their time back?
It's a big idea. I know a lot of really wealthy people, and they are prisoners of their wealth.
Really?
Yes, that unfortunately is the norm.
How does he go from having zero freedom to teaching others how to achieve total freedom? To find the answer, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to a childhood that wasn't a home, but a storm, a place of pure, destructive chaos. The Long Fall, a boy in a world of fire. Dan Martell was born in a small Canadian town called Moncton. For most people, a small town means a quiet life, but Dan's life was anything but quiet. It was loud, it was messy, and it was full of trouble from the very beginning. His home was not a safe place, it was a battlefield. His mother had a serious problem with drinking, which filled their home with sadness and uncertainty. His father was a salesman who was gone most of the time, leaving Dan alone to face the storm without a guide, without a protector. This wasn't just a tough childhood. It was a training ground for chaos. It was a place where nothing was stable, nothing was safe, and nothing could be trusted. When you grow up in a storm, you learn to become the storm. Inside Dan's mind, another battle was raging. At age 11, doctors put a name on it, ADHD.
Every once in a while, a book's gonna keep my attention to the very end. I don't need to read the whole book. I'm just looking for one thing that I think can change my whole perspective. One nugget, one idea that'll give me something to move forward with. Once I got that, I might close the book, put it down, and never visit it again, and that's okay.
For Dan, it meant his brain was like a television with all the channels changing at once, a constant blast of noise that he couldn't turn off. This inner chaos mixed with the chaos at home created a dangerous explosion. He started having huge problems with anger. He couldn't control his feelings and they would burst out of him in scary ways. The situation at home got so bad, so completely out of control, that when he was only 12 years old, he was taken away. He was put in a crisis center, a place for kids who have nowhere else to go. After that, he was sent to live with foster families, strangers who were supposed to take care of him. But the fire inside him was too big for anyone to put out. His destructive feelings weren't just feelings, they became actions, real, dangerous actions. In a story he tells himself, a story that shows just how lost he was, an 11-year-old Dan Martell found some Roman candles, a type of firework. He went inside his foster home, a place that was supposed to be safe, and he lit them. He shot fireballs of red and green inside the house, setting a couch on fire. Think about that for a second. This wasn't just a kid playing with matches. This was a scream for help, a scream made of fire and smoke. It was as if all the anger and confusion burning inside him had exploded into the real world for everyone to see. This was a clear sign that his life was spinning faster and faster into darkness. At 13, things got even worse. He was introduced to questionable substances. This, he says, was the moment he completely went out of control. It was like pouring gasoline on a fire that was already burning down the house. He started hanging out with the wrong people. A crowd that he says included dangerous motorcycle gangs. He was no longer just a troubled kid. He was becoming a criminal. By the time he was 15, he was locked up in juvenile detention, a jail for kids. He had hit a wall. When he got out, he promised himself that he would change. He would turn his life around and walk a different path. That promise, that moment of hope, lasted for only 24 hours. One day. That's all it took before he was right back with the same people, doing the same dangerous things, selling questionable substances on the street. He was on a one-way road and everyone knew where it was headed, a jail cell or a graveyard. That final stop came when he was 17 years old. He was in a stolen car, his mind and body filled with questionable substances and alcohol. In a backpack on the seat next to him, there was a handgun. Suddenly, the flashing blue and red lights of a police car filled his mirrors. Panic set in. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal and took off, leading the police on a terrifying, high-speed chase through the streets of his own town. He was a missile of anger and fear flying through the dark. The chase ended with a crash. He smashed the stolen car into the side of a house. In that single, wrecked moment, with his heart pounding and his mind spinning, he made a final, desperate choice. He decided he wanted to die. He reached over to the backpack, his hand searching for the cold metal of the gun. His plan was to point it at the police officers who were now surrounding the car. He hoped they would see the gun and be forced to shoot him, to end his pain, to end his life. He calls it an attempt at police-assisted death. But in that dark moment, something happened. Something he believes was a miracle. He says he felt like someone above was watching out for me, because when he tried to pull the gun out, it got stuck in the bag. He couldn't get it out. Before he could try again, the police were on him. They smashed the car window, tackled him, and dragged him out of the wreckage before he could end his own life. The next morning, Dan Martell woke up not in a hospital, but in a cold, gray jail cell. He would spend the next 6 months locked up before being sent to rehab. This was it. Rock bottom, the absolute end of the line. His early life was a perfect storm of chaos. A home that was broken, a brain that was wired for distraction, and feelings so big and angry that they exploded into violence. His actions were the physical proof of the disorder that had ruled his entire world. This terrible experience burned a lesson into his soul. To survive, he knew he would have to find the opposite of chaos. He would need to find order. He would need to find a system. He would need to find something, anything, powerful enough to control the fire inside him that had nearly burned his entire life to the ground. The turning point. How 2 words saved a life. After his time in jail, Dan was sent to a place called Portage Atlantic. It was a rehab center for teenagers addicted to questionable substances, located in an old church camp in the middle of the woods in New Brunswick. This place, he says, is the reason he is alive today. Portage didn't just save his life, it gave him a new one. For 11 long months, he was forced to face his demons. He went through intense therapy, talking about the pain and anger he had kept locked inside for years. He started to slowly, carefully, rebuild the broken bridges with his family. He learned for the first time how to live his life without questionable substances, how to be a part of the world instead of trying to burn it down. The impact this place had on him is immeasurable. It's not just a story he tells, it's a debt he continues to pay back. For more than 20 years since he left, Dan has gone back to Portage once or twice every single year. He walks through the same doors he walked through as a broken teenager, and he stands in front of a new generation of lost kids. He shares his story, the whole story, the ugly parts included, to show them that there is a way out, to give them the one thing he never had: hope. It was inside the quiet woods of Portage that the single most important moment of his entire life happened. It wasn't in a therapy session, it was in an old, dusty cabin. He was helping the camp's maintenance man, a guy named Rick, clean the place out. In a forgotten corner under a pile of junk, he found two things that would change his destiny: a dusty old 486 computer and a bright yellow book about computer programming. He dragged the old computer out, plugged it in, and by some miracle, it turned on. He opened the yellow book to the very first chapter, and following the instructions, he started typing weird commands onto the screen. He typed line after line of what looked like a secret language. Then he hit enter. On the black screen, two simple words appeared: "Hello world." In his own words, that moment changed everything. In that instant, programming wasn't just a hobby. It became what he calls his new addiction. But this addiction was different. This one didn't destroy, it built. The world of computer code was the perfect medicine for the poison of his past. The logic was clean, the rules were clear. He later explained that growing up in a world of pure chaos and not knowing what would happen next made him fall in love with the absolute certainty of code. As long as the computer was on, the code would do exactly what you told it to do every single time. For the first time in his entire life, Dan had found a world that made sense. A world where if you did A, you always got B. It was predictable. It was reliable. It was controllable. It was everything his life had never been. This new obsession with code clicked together with another powerful idea he was learning. Business is the ultimate personal development program. He realized that building a business was the hardest self-help program in the world. He started to take all the energy, all the intense focus, all the hustle he had once used to sell questionable substances on the street, and he pointed it like a laser beam at building software. This is the key to understanding everything Dan Martell did next. The core parts of his personality, the parts that made him a good criminal, didn't just disappear in rehab. His intense focus, his ability to figure things out, his willingness to take huge risks, all of it was still there. But now, it was aimed at a new target. He wasn't afraid to start a company and fail miserably. Why? Because the other option he had faced was a lifetime in jail or a bullet from a cop's gun. Compared to that, a failed business was nothing. This gave him a secret weapon. He had the freedom to try, to fail, to learn, and to get back up again because he had already survived worse. His journey as an entrepreneur wasn't the story of a bad kid who became a new person. It was the story of a powerful, dangerous kid who finally learned how to aim his fire at something that could build an empire instead of burning one down. The tough road, building an empire, one failure at a time. With a new, healthy addiction to code and a powerful hustle aimed in the right direction, Dan Martell started his journey as an entrepreneur. This was a tough road, full of early mistakes, big wins that were earned with sweat and tears, and a never-ending process of learning by doing. During this time, he would build 3 different technology companies and sell every single one of them. This is how he built the skills and earned the money that he would later use to build his worldwide coaching empire. Like most people starting their first business, Dan's first few ideas were a bit clumsy, but these failures were the most important lessons he would ever learn. His first real company was called maritimevacation.ca. It was a website for renting out vacation homes. He got the idea from his dad, who owned a small cottage and had a hard time keeping track of who was renting it and when. True to his new personality, Dan didn't just have an idea, he hustled. He needed money to pay for the computer servers to run the website, which cost $300 a month. So he went to his own dad and pre-sold him the service for $2,000. He got his first customer and the money he needed before he had even finished building the product. To get more customers, he hired his younger brother for just $2 an hour. His brother's job was to copy all the names and addresses of cottage owners from a paper tourism guide and put them into a computer database. Then, Dan used that list to mail letters to all of them, asking them to join his website. A few weeks later, something amazing happened. Envelopes started showing up in his mailbox. Inside were checks for payment and photos of cottages. It was working. Even though he was getting some customers, The business was shaky, and in the end, it failed. Dan says he made 2 huge mistakes that taught him lessons he would never forget. First, he was thinking way too small. By calling his website Maritime Vacation, he was stuck only doing business in a small part of Canada called the Maritimes. The lesson hit him hard when he found a competitor whose website was called atthecottage.com. That name was so much bigger and could grow anywhere in the world. He had trapped himself with a small name. The second mistake was even bigger. He wasn't passionate about the business. He didn't love vacation rentals. He had only built the website to solve his dad's problem, not a problem that he himself cared deeply about. He learned a powerful lesson. To survive the incredibly hard journey of building a business, you have to be solving a problem that you are obsessed with. These early failures were not the end of his story. They were his real-world school, teaching him lessons that no university could. The first big win, Spheric Technologies. At 24 years old, with $75,000 in his bank account that he had earned from doing small computer consulting jobs, Dan launched his next company, Spheric Technologies. This was it. This was his first major success. Spheric was a business he started with his own money, no help from investors. It was a service business with a mission that was way ahead of its time, to socialize the enterprise. This was in the mid-2000s, long before giant companies used social media inside their businesses. Spheric was helping some of the biggest companies in the world, like Procter & Gamble and Dole Foods, build social features into the private websites their employees used. His methods for getting these giant companies as clients were brilliant and showed his street-smart hustle. He would look at public job websites to find big companies that had just spent millions of dollars on new expensive software. Then he would call the company, but he wouldn't say who he was. Sometimes he would pretend to be someone looking for a job. This trick allowed him to talk to people inside the company and gather secret information about what they were working on, who the boss was, and how big their team was. After he had all this inside information, he would call back. But this time, he would be Dan from Spheric. He would make a perfect pitch to solve the exact problems he had just uncovered. It was like having the answers to the test before you even took it. The hustle was a massive success. Spheric grew at an incredible rate of 152% every single year for 4 years straight. By 2008, his company was a hot item that other bigger companies wanted to buy. He sold Spheric Technologies to a company from the United States. While the exact price is a secret, he has said it was an 8-figure exit, which means it was for at least $10 million. Just like that, at 27 years old, Dan Martell was a millionaire. The sale gave him the money and the confidence to start playing in an even bigger league. He admits that for a little while, he was semi-retired. He bought his dream cottage on a lake and a fancy boat for wakeboarding. But the itch to build, the addiction to business, soon came back. The crisis, Flowtown. After selling his first company, Dan wanted his next project to be his own software product, not just a service. In 2009, he started a new company called Flowtown. It was a social media marketing tool that helped businesses learn more about their customers by connecting their email lists to social media profiles. The company was an instant hit. He raised $750,000 from early investors and quickly grew to have over 26,000 business customers. It looked like he had another winner on his hands. Then disaster struck, out of nowhere. In October 2010, the Wall Street Journal, one of the biggest newspapers in the world, published a huge story that slammed Facebook for leaking its users' private information. The public was furious. In response, Facebook panicked and completely changed its rules, shutting down the very features that Flowtown needed to work. In one single day, their entire business was destroyed. Their main service was now impossible to offer. The company was facing death. This was the moment that tests what a leader is truly made of. With only 60 days of money left in the bank before the company would go out of business forever, Dan rallied his small team. He became what he calls a wartime CEO. There was no time for excuses. It was time to fight. Instead of giving up and closing the company, they decided to pivot. A pivot is when a company makes a fast and drastic change to survive. His team worked day and night, quickly building and testing new ideas. In an incredible turnaround, they reinvented the company. Flowtown was no longer a social media tool. It became a gift marketing company, helping businesses send personalized, real-life gifts to their best customers to build loyalty. The pivot worked. It was a miracle. Less than 1 year after being on the edge of total failure, the new Flowtown was bought by a bigger company called Demandforce in 2011. Again, the exact price was a secret, but Dan said that his investors were extremely happy. The story of Flowtown became a legend in the business world, a perfect example of how to survive a disaster and come back even stronger. The final validation. Clarity.fm. Dan's third big company, Clarity.fm, might have been his most creative yet. He launched it in 2012. It was a website, a marketplace that changed the game for getting expert advice. The idea was simple but revolutionary. The website connected regular entrepreneurs with some of the best and most famous experts in the world. People like Mark Cuban, the billionaire from Shark Tank. If you had a difficult business problem, you could go on Clarity.fm, find an expert, and call them on the phone right away. You would pay by the minute, only for the time you used. It was like having a team of millionaire advisors in your pocket. The idea was a huge success. The platform grew to have over 50,000 experts ready to take calls. Before it was sold, it had helped people make over 150,000 advice calls. This proved there was a huge need for what he had built. In 2015, Clarity.fm was bought by a company called Fundable and became the main part of their new, bigger platform, startups.co. This was his third successful sale of a company in just 10 years. It cemented Dan Martell's reputation as a master of building, growing, and selling technology companies. He had completed the gauntlet. He had proven himself time and time again. The teacher, building a new kind of empire. After selling his third company, Clarity.fm, Dan Martell started a new chapter in his life. He was ready to multiply his impact. He changed his main focus from being a founder who builds companies to being a coach, an investor, and a media star. He decided to use all the tough lessons he had learned to build a brand new kind of empire, an empire built on teaching others. He started his YouTube channel, but not for the reason most people do. He wasn't trying to get famous or build an audience. His mission was much more personal. He said, "I wish someone had done the same for me." He wanted to be the mentor for others that he never had when he was a young, struggling kid trying to figure things out. This honest, mission-driven goal connected with people in a huge way. His presence on social media didn't just grow, it exploded. Today, he is a social media giant. He has over 1.6 million subscribers on YouTube, 1.5 million followers on Instagram, and 1.2 million followers on TikTok. He has built a massive tribe of people who look to him for advice. The way he creates all this content is a perfect example of the very ideas he teaches. It's all built on two main things: being incredibly consistent and having amazing systems. He teaches that big success doesn't come from short bursts of hard work. It comes from sustained effort over time. It's about showing up day after day, week after week, and he lives by this rule. He posts new content on a super strict schedule. But here's the secret to how he does it without burning out. Here's where he practices what he preaches. He has built an entire team called Martell Media that does most of the work for him. In a move that shocks most business owners, he admits that most of his videos and posts go live on the internet without him even looking at them for a final check. He makes the content, and then he trusts his team to handle the rest. He makes it, and he moves on. This is a real-life example of him buying back his own time. This system has also become a powerful way for him to make money. He talks openly about making millions of dollars directly from his social media. He even shared a strategy that he says earned him $3 million on Instagram DMs in under 7 months. The coaching machine, SaaS Academy. The main engine of his current business empire is SaaS Academy. It is one of the biggest and most successful coaching companies in the entire world for software founders. The program is built around what he calls the 3 C's: content, coaching, and community. When people join, they get access to his proven playbooks. These are step-by-step guides and templates for everything a business needs, from how to sell their product to how to hire the right people. They also get direct coaching from Dan himself and from other world-class business experts. Finally, they join a powerful community of other software founders. They connect at special private live events that happen 3 times a year where they can share ideas and help each other grow. The promise of SaaS Academy is simple: to help founders grow their businesses much faster and eventually have what Dan calls the perfect exit, selling their company for a life-changing amount of money. The success stories he shares are powerful. He has clients who claim they grew their monthly income by 12 times, or went from making less than $10,000 a month to over $4 million a year after joining his program. If time really is our most valuable asset, why do so many of us waste it chasing money?